The sound of a gavel hitting wood is something you never forget. It is a sharp, final sound that cuts through the stale air of a courtroom like a gunshot, signaling the absolute end of one life and the terrifying beginning of another. For me, that sound echoed in a small, sterile courtroom in downtown Seattle when I was exactly 16 years old, marking the moment I was legally emancipated from my parents. Most people think emancipation is about freedom, about rebellion, about a teenager wanting to break the rules. But for me, it wasn't an act of rebellion. It was an act of survival. It was the only way to ensure that the people who were supposed to love me could never drag me back into their web of lies again. But the story didn't start in that courtroom. It started 6 months earlier, on a Tuesday morning that felt just like any other, until my mother handed me a suitcase and told me to leave. My name is Elena Vance. I am 32 years old now, a forensic accountant living in a high-rise in Chicago, making a comfortable living by finding the ugly secrets people try to hide in their numbers. I spend my days tracking embezzlement, fraud, and financial ruin because numbers make sense to me in a way people never have. Numbers don't lie. Numbers don't pretend to love you and then throw you away. But back then, I wasn't Elena the successful accountant. I was just the other daughter. The one who wasn't a prodigy. The one who wasn't beautiful in the way magazines define it. The one who was expendable. My sister, Isabella, was the star of our family, the sun around which my parents' entire universe revolved. She was a violin virtuoso at 14, playing concertos that made grown men weep. She was a beauty pageant queen at 15, with a smile that could light up a room and a charm that could manipulate anyone. My parents didn't just love her, they worshipped her. They built their entire lives, their entire identity, around her success. I was the background noise, the shadow that existed only to make her light shine brighter. I accepted my role because I didn't know there was any other way to be. I cooked dinner while my mother drove Isabella to rehearsals. I cleaned the house while my father bragged to his friends about Isabella's latest trophy. I helped Isabella with her homework late into the night so she could focus on her art. I was useful, and as long as I was useful, I was allowed to stay. I told myself that this was love. I told myself that being part of a family meant making sacrifices. But then came the accident. Or rather, the incident that everyone called an accident, even though we all knew the truth deep down in the dark corners of our house where we didn't speak about reality. It was a rainy afternoon in late November, the kind of day where the sky is a bruise of purple and gray. Isabella had a recital that evening, a showcase for a prestigious conservatory in New York that could determine her entire future. The house was vibrating with tension. Isabella was nervous, snapping at everyone, throwing her violin case around the living room, screaming that her dress wasn't right, that her hair was flat, that her life was over. I was in the kitchen, making herbal tea to calm her down, trying to be the good sister, the invisible support system. Suddenly, I heard a crash, a loud, shattering sound that stopped my heart. I ran into the living room to find Isabella standing over my mother's antique Ming vase, the one that had belonged to her grandmother, the one that was insured for more than my college fund. It was shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces on the hardwood floor. Isabella looked at me, her eyes wide with panic, her face pale. She didn't look like a prodigy then. She looked like a scared child who knew she had broken the one thing she wasn't allowed to touch. "You have to take the blame," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What?" I asked, staring at the shards. "If Mom finds out I broke it, she'll be so upset she won't be able to drive me to the recital. She'll have a migraine. She'll scream. She'll ruin everything. Elena, please, you have to tell her you did it." I shook my head, backing away. "Bella, it's just a vase. Tell her it was an accident. She loves you. She won't care." "No!" she screamed, grabbing my arm with a grip that bruised. "You don't understand. I need this night to be perfect. I need her to be calm. Just tell her you were running. Just tell her you tripped. She never expects anything from you anyway. She already thinks you're clumsy." And she was right. They didn't expect anything from me. So when my mother walked in a minute later, attracted by the noise, and saw the destruction, I opened my mouth to defend myself, but Isabella was faster. "Elena was running," she said, tears instantly welling up in her eyes, spilling over her cheeks in a perfect display of sorrow. I told her to be careful, Mom. I told her not to play near it, but she knocked it over. My mother looked at me. There was no question in her eyes, no doubt, no hesitation. She didn't ask for my side of the story. She just looked at me with cold, hard disappointment. Clean it up, she said, her voice like ice. And stay in your room tonight. We can't have your clumsiness ruining your sister's big night. You are grounded until further notice. That was the pattern of our lives. Isabella broke things, and I fixed them. Isabella made mistakes, and I paid for them. But the vase was nothing compared to what happened next. 2 weeks later, my father's car was found wrapped around a telephone pole 3 blocks from our house. It was 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. The police knocked on our door, flashing lights illuminating the front lawn. My father answered, sleepy and confused. The officer asked if he knew where his car was. My father said it was in the garage. It wasn't. Isabella had taken the car for a joyride without a license. She had snuck out to meet a boy, lost control on the wet pavement, and crashed. She walked away without a scratch, miraculously, but the car was totaled. When the police brought her home, she was sobbing, shaking, playing the victim perfectly. My parents didn't ask if she was okay. They didn't ask what happened. They looked at me, standing at the top of the stairs in my pajamas. Elena took the keys, my father told the officer, his voice steady, his eyes daring me to contradict him. She's always been reckless. She stole the car while we were sleeping. Isabella tried to stop her. That's why she was in the car. She was trying to bring her sister home. I stood there, frozen, my hands gripping the banister. This wasn't a vase. This was a felony. Grand theft auto, reckless driving, destruction of property. No, I whispered, my voice barely audible. I didn't. I don't even know how to drive. I was asleep. She's lying, Isabella sobbed from the sofa, clutching a blanket my mother had wrapped around her. I tried to stop her, officer. She pushed me. She was driving like a maniac. The officer looked between us. The perfect, crying girl on the couch, protected by her parents, and the quiet, plain girl standing in the hallway, alone. He didn't even ask for an alibi. He didn't check for fingerprints on the steering wheel. He put me in handcuffs. I was marched out of my own house in front of the neighbors. I spent the night in a juvenile detention center. My parents didn't come to get me. They left me there for 3 days to think about what I'd done. It was cold. It smelled of bleach and despair, and I was terrified. When they finally picked me up, the charges had been dropped. My father had called in a favor with a friend in the district attorney's office. But the record was there, a stain, a warning. We saved you, my mother said as we drove home in silence, not looking at me. We cleaned up your mess. Now you owe us. I owe them? I owed them nothing. But I was trapped. I had no money, no car, no family outside of them. So I went back to being the shadow. I went back to being the scapegoat. Until the Tuesday morning that changed everything. I came downstairs to find my parents sitting at the kitchen table. There was no breakfast laid out, no coffee brewing, just a suitcase. My suitcase. It was packed and sitting by the door. Sit down, Elena, my father said. He wasn't angry. He was calm, businesslike, as if he were firing an employee. We need to talk about the future. What future? I asked, looking at the bag, a cold knot forming in my stomach. Isabella got into the conservatory, my mother said, her face glowing with a pride I had never seen directed at me. Full scholarship. But living in New York is expensive. We need to move there to support her. We need to rent an apartment, pay for coaching, travel, competition fees. Okay, I said slowly, trying to process. So we're moving? When? My father shook his head. We are moving. You are staying here. I stared at him. What? Where? In this house? No, my mother said. We sold the house. We found a boarding school in Oregon. It's affordable. And they specialize in troubled teens, girls like you who steal cars and break things. Troubled? I laughed, a sharp, hysterical sound that hurt my throat. I have straight A's. I cook your meals. I clean your house. I went to jail for your daughter. I am not troubled. I am the only thing holding this house together." "Lower your voice," my father snapped, slamming his hand on the table. "This is exactly why you need structure. You're resentful. You're jealous. You're holding Isabella back. We can't afford to take you to New York. The city is too expensive for 4 people. And frankly, Elena, we need to focus all our resources on Bella right now. This is her moment. We can't let your drama distract her." Drama. My existence was drama. My breathing was a distraction. My life was an inconvenience. "So you're kicking me out," I said, my voice shaking. "You're sending me away so you can play happy family with the golden child." "We're giving you a chance to straighten out," my father corrected, standing up. "The school starts next week, but we're leaving today. The movers are coming in an hour." "Today?" I screamed. "You're leaving me today?" "We have to get settled before Isabella's orientation," my mother said, checking her watch as if this were a dentist appointment. "The bus ticket to Oregon is in the envelope on the counter. You'll stay at the motel by the station until the bus leaves on Monday. It's paid for." A motel. Alone. At 16. "You can't do this," I whispered, tears finally spilling over. "I'm your daughter." My mother looked at me then, really looked at me, and her expression was devoid of anything resembling love. It was empty. "You're 18 months away from being an adult, Elena. It's time you learn to stand on your own 2 feet. Isabella needs us. You'll figure it out. You always do." They left an hour later. I watched from the porch as they drove away, the U-Haul truck following them like a hearse carrying my childhood. Isabella waved from the passenger seat. She didn't look sad. She didn't look guilty. She looked relieved. I stood there on the driveway of the empty house, holding a suitcase that contained everything I owned, and felt a strange sensation wash over me. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't fear. It was clarity. Cold, sharp, absolute clarity. They were gone. They had abandoned me, and for the first time in my life, I was free. I didn't go to the motel. I didn't go to the bus station. I walked 3 miles to the public library, logged onto a computer, and looked up Emancipation of Minors in Washington State. I had $400 in cash that I had hidden in a hollowed-out book over the last 2 years, birthday money from a distant aunt, change I found in the laundry. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I spent the next 3 nights sleeping in the 24-hour laundromat down the street, curled up behind the dryers where it was warm, using my suitcase as a pillow. During the day, I went to school. I didn't tell anyone what had happened. I showered in the gym locker room, I ate the free lunch, and I planned. I found a lawyer who did pro bono work for youth at risk. Her name was Sarah Jenkins. When I walked into her office, smelling of laundry detergent and exhaustion, she didn't turn me away. She listened. I told her everything. The vase, the car accident, the abandonment. I showed her the bus ticket. I showed her the empty house. "They left a minor with no guardian and no support," Sarah said, her voice shaking with anger. "That's child abandonment. We can sue them. We can force them to pay support. We can call CPS." "No," I said firmly. "I don't want their money. I don't want them to come back. I want to be free. I want to be emancipated so they can never touch me again. So they can never drag me back into their mess. I want to be a legal adult so I can work, rent an apartment, and disappear." Sarah looked at me with respect. She filed the paperwork the next day. The court date was set for 3 weeks later. In the meantime, she helped me get into a youth shelter. It wasn't luxury, but it was a bed. It was food. It was safety. I got a job washing dishes at a diner after school. I saved every penny. The day of the hearing, my parents didn't even show up. They were in New York, setting up their new life. They sent a lawyer, a cheap one, who told the judge that they consented to the emancipation as it was in the best interest of the family dynamic. The judge, a stern woman with glasses who looked like she took no nonsense, looked at the lawyer like he was something she'd stepped in on the sidewalk. "The best interest of the family dynamic?" she repeated, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Or the best way to absolve themselves of responsibility for a child they clearly do not want? This is shameful. She granted the emancipation immediately. She struck the gavel. Bang. And just like that, I was an adult. I was 16, homeless, and alone. But I was mine. I finished high school sleeping in that shelter. I got a scholarship to the University of Washington. I worked 2 jobs. I studied until my eyes burned. I majored in accounting because numbers didn't lie. Numbers didn't play favorites. Numbers didn't abandon you. I graduated at the top of my class. I got a job at a big firm. I moved to Chicago. I built a life, a quiet, orderly, safe life. I didn't date much. I didn't make many friends. I didn't trust people. I trusted ledgers. I trusted audits. For 10 years, I didn't hear a word from my family. No calls, no letters. I Googled them sometimes, late at night when I couldn't sleep. Isabella was doing well, or so it seemed. There were articles about her recitals, photos of her in designer gowns, smiling next to my beaming parents in New York society pages. The prodigy, the headlines called her, the golden girl. It stung, but it was a distant sting, like touching a scar that had healed over. I thought I was done with them. I thought I had escaped the shadow. But the past is a boomerang. It always comes back, usually when you least expect it. It was a Friday evening in October. I was still at the office, finishing up a forensic audit for a client, surrounded by stacks of paper and empty coffee cups, when my phone rang. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But something, maybe instinct, maybe fate, maybe the ghost of the girl I used to be, made me pick up. Hello? Elena? The voice was breathless, panicked, but instantly recognizable. It was my mother. I hadn't heard her voice in 16 years. The sound of it transported me instantly back to that kitchen table, to the suitcase, to the rejection. My hand tightened on the phone until my knuckles turned white. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice cold and steady. "Elena, please don't hang up. We need you. We're in trouble." "We?" I asked, a dark satisfaction curling in my gut. "Isabella. She's been arrested." "Arrested?" I leaned back in my chair. "For what? Joyriding again? Did she break another vase?" "No," my mother sobbed, a raw, ugly sound. "For murder." I froze. Murder. The word hung in the air, heavy and impossible. "She didn't do it!" my mother cried. "She's innocent! You have to help us, Elena. You're an accountant, right? A forensic one? I saw your profile online. They're saying she embezzled money and killed her husband to cover it up. But it's not true. You have to prove it. You have to come to New York." "I don't have to do anything," I said. "You made that very clear 16 years ago when you left me on the porch with a bus ticket." "Please," she begged. "She's your sister. She's all we have." "All you have?" I laughed. "You had 2 daughters. You threw one away." "Elena, listen to me." My mother's voice dropped to a desperate whisper. "If you don't help her, if she goes to prison, the truth will come out. About everything. About the car accident. About the vase. About what really happened the night we left." I stopped laughing. "What are you talking about?" "You think you know why we left?" she hissed. "You think it was just about the conservatory? You have no idea what Isabella did. You have no idea what we covered up. If this goes to trial, it all comes out. And you're involved, Elena. You're in the records." A chill ran down my spine. Involved? How could I be involved? I was the victim. "I'm hanging up," I said. "Don't you dare," she screamed. "If you don't come, I will tell the police that you were the one who masterminded the fraud, that you set her up. I'll tell them you've been jealous of her your whole life, and you finally found a way to destroy her. Who will they believe, Elena? The grieving parents? Or the estranged, bitter sister?" I stared at the phone. 16 years later, and nothing had changed. They were still protecting her. They were still willing to sacrifice me to save the golden child. But this time, I wasn't a helpless teenager. I was a forensic accountant. I hunted liars for a living. "Fine," I said. "I'll come, but not to save her. I'm coming to find the truth." New York City smelled like rain, exhaust fumes, and old money when I landed, a sharp contrast to the sterile, conditioned air of my office in Chicago. I took a cab straight to the address my mother had texted me, watching the city blur past the window. It wasn't a police station or a lawyer's office where they wanted to meet. It was a penthouse on the Upper East Side. Of course. Even in the middle of a murder investigation, the Vances had to maintain appearances. They couldn't be seen crumbling in public. The doorman looked down his nose at my off-the-rack trench coat and rolling suitcase, clearly judging me as someone who didn't belong in a building where the HOA fees cost more than my first car. But he let me up. The elevator opened directly into an apartment that was a monument to their vanity. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and walls lined with portraits of Isabella. Isabella with her violin, Isabella receiving an award, Isabella smiling that perfect, practiced smile. There were no pictures of me. It was as if I had never existed in this family. My mother was waiting in the foyer. She looked older, her face pulled tight by expensive plastic surgery and immense stress, holding a martini glass with a trembling hand. She was wearing silk, but she looked like she was wearing a shroud. "You came," she said, not as a greeting but as an accusation, as if my presence was just another burden she had to bear. "I told you I would," I replied, not stepping forward to hug her. I kept my hands in my pockets, maintaining the distance I had built over 16 years. "Where are the files?" "In the study," she said, gesturing vaguely down a hallway that seemed to stretch on forever. "Your father is in there with the defense team. Isabella is sedated. In her room. She can't stop crying." I walked past her. I didn't ask how she was. I didn't ask about my father. I didn't ask to see my sister. I walked into the study, a room smelling of rich mahogany, stale cigar smoke, and fear. My father was sitting behind a massive desk, looking diminished. The arrogant, powerful man who had exiled me from his kingdom was gone, replaced by a terrified old man trying to buy his way out of a nightmare. He stood up when I entered, a flicker of hope in his eyes that made my stomach turn. "Elena," he breathed, as if I were a savior and not the daughter he had discarded. "Thank God. Look, the lawyers are useless. They charge a fortune and tell us nothing. They say the evidence against Bella is overwhelming. The forensic audit shows millions missing from Julian's company, transferred to accounts in Bella's name. And then, the poison." "Arsenic," I said, reciting the details I'd read on the plane. "Found in his evening scotch, a scotch Isabella poured." "She didn't do it!" My father slammed his hand on the desk, the vibration rattling the crystal decanter. "She doesn't know how to transfer money. She doesn't know how to poison someone. She plays the violin, for God's sake. She's an artist, not a criminal." "I know what she plays," I said coldly, dropping my bag on the floor. "And I know what she's capable of. Give me the books." I kicked the lawyers out. I needed silence. I needed focus. I spent the next 48 hours in that study, surrounded by the ghosts of my family's ambition. I didn't sleep. I barely ate. I fueled myself with black coffee and a burning need to know the truth. I dove into the financial wreckage of Isabella's marriage. Julian, her husband, had been a hedge fund manager, a shark in a suit. But as I traced the digital footprint of the missing money, I realized he wasn't the one stealing. The money was indeed flowing out of his firm, systematically, month after month, for 16 years. The amounts varied, sometimes 10,000, sometimes 50,000, but the pattern was precise. Every time Isabella had a major success, a concert at Carnegie Hall, a feature in Vogue, an award in Paris, the payments spiked. It didn't look like embezzlement, it looked like extortion. I followed the trail through a maze of shell companies in the Cayman Islands, peeling back layer after layer of corporate obfuscation. It was designed to be untraceable, but whoever built this didn't account for someone who knew the family's history. And at 4 a.m. on the second night, my eyes burning and my head pounding, I found it. The shell companies all funneled back to a single holding group called Nemesis LLC. And the registered agent for Nemesis LLC was a name I hadn't thought about since I was 16 years old, Sarah Jenkins. My blood ran cold. I sat back in the leather chair, the room spinning slightly. Sarah Jenkins. The pro bono lawyer who had helped me get emancipated, the woman who had listened to my sob story in that small office in Seattle, who had handed me tissues, who had filed the paperwork to set me free from my parents, the woman I had viewed as my savior. Why was she receiving millions of dollars from my sister's husband? I pulled up Sarah's current profile on my laptop. She wasn't a pro bono lawyer for at-risk youth anymore. She was a high-powered defense attorney in New York, a partner at a top firm, known for getting impossible acquittals for wealthy clients. She lived in a penthouse not far from here. And then, the pieces clicked into place with a sickening clarity. The vase, the car accident, the neighbor's boy in Seattle. Sarah hadn't just helped me get emancipated out of the kindness of her heart. She had used me. She had mined me for information. She had taken the secrets I gave her in confidence, the secrets about my family's desperate, obsessive need to protect Isabella's reputation, and she had weaponized them. She had found the one thing my parents feared more than anything: scandal. I dug deeper, hacking into Julian's private emails. It was illegal, but I didn't care. I needed to know why he died. I found a thread between him and Sarah starting 6 months ago. Julian had found out. He had discovered the payments my parents were making to Sarah to keep the Seattle incident quiet. He realized his wife wasn't a murderer, but a cash cow being milked by a blackmailer. He had threatened Sarah. "I'm going to the police," he wrote in an email dated 3 days before he died. "I'm going to expose you. You've bled this family dry for 16 years over a lie." A lie? What lie? I stared at the screen. If the Seattle incident, the hit and run where Isabella supposedly crippled a boy, was a lie, then why were my parents paying? Unless Sarah had convinced them that Isabella had actually killed someone, unless Sarah had manufactured a crime to blackmail them, using the information I had innocently given her as a teenager. I felt sick. I felt violated. But mostly, I felt a cold, hard rage. Sarah had orchestrated everything. She had manipulated my emancipation to isolate me, ensuring I wouldn't be around to ask questions or look at the bank accounts. She had terrified my parents into fleeing the state. She had been draining their fortune for nearly 2 decades. And when Julian threatened to stop the flow of money, she poisoned him and framed Isabella to wrap up the loose ends. It was perfect. A murder-suicide of a failing marriage. Isabella would go to prison, the secrets would stay buried, and Sarah would walk away with millions. I needed proof. Hard proof. I couldn't just go to the police with a spreadsheet and a theory. I needed a confession. I looked at the time. 5 a.m. The city outside was starting to wake up, but the darkness in that room was absolute. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I found in Julian's contacts. Sarah Jenkins. She answered on the second ring, her voice smooth, alert, unbothered by the early hour. "This is Sarah Jenkins." "Hello, Sarah," I said, my voice vibrating with 16 years of suppressed anger. "It's Elena Vance, the girl from the youth shelter." There was a pause, a long, heavy silence where I could almost hear her calculating the odds. Then a chuckle, a low, amused sound. "Elena, my, you've grown up. I heard you were in town. I wondered if you'd call. Are you looking for another pro bono case?" "I know what you did," I said, keeping my voice level. "I know about Nemesis LLC. I know about the payments. I know you killed Julian." "That's a very dangerous accusation to make," she purred, her tone shifting from amused to icy. "Especially over the phone. Do you have any idea who you're talking to?" "I have the files, Sarah. I have the emails. I have the bank transfers. I'm going to the FBI." "No, you're not," she said confidently. "Because if you do, your sister goes down for the car accident in Seattle. The hit and run, remember? The boy she crippled? The one you told me about? I have the medical records, Elena. I have the police report that your father paid to make disappear. If I go down, I take the golden child with me, and your parents. They'll all rot in prison for obstruction of justice. You're the only one who walks away clean. Is that what you want? To finally destroy them? To finish what you started when you walked into my office?" I hesitated. Not because I was considering it, but because I needed her to think I was. I needed to play the role she expected of me, the bitter, jealous sister. I don't care about them, I lied, injecting a tremor of greed into my voice. They threw me away, but I want my cut. Julian was going to expose you because he wanted the money. I want it now. Ah, Sarah sighed, sounding relieved. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. You're greedy, just like your father. I can work with greedy. Fine. How much? 5 million, I said, and the original files on the Seattle incident. I want insurance. I want to know I'm the only one holding the leash. Meet me, she said instantly. Tonight, dusk, Central Park, Bethesda Terrace. Come alone. If I see a cop, the files go to the press, and your sister is destroyed. Do we have a deal? I'll be there, I said. I hung up the phone. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from adrenaline. I walked out of the study and found my mother in the kitchen, staring into her coffee cup as if it held the answers to the universe. She looked up when I entered, her eyes red-rimmed. Is it true? I asked, my voice soft but demanding. The boy in Seattle? Did Isabella hurt him? My mother looked at me, tears streaming down her face, stripping away the layers of vanity. Sarah showed us pictures, she whispered. He was in a wheelchair. She said he would never walk again. She said he was just a child. She said if we paid her, she would represent the family and keep it quiet. She said she could make the police report disappear. We just wanted to protect Bella. We couldn't let her life be ruined by one mistake. You didn't protect her, I said, grabbing my coat from the rack. You fed her to a wolf, and you sacrificed me to do it. I didn't tell her where I was going. I didn't tell her that I had already forwarded every document to a private server. I walked out of the penthouse and into the cold morning air. I had a meeting to prepare for, and I knew exactly how to trap a lawyer who thought she was smarter than everyone else. I wasn't going to Central Park for money. I was going there for blood. Central Park at dusk is a labyrinth of shadows and fading light, a place where the city's relentless noise fades into a dull, rhythmic roar, like the sound of the ocean heard through a thick wall. I walked toward the Bethesda Terrace, my phone clutched in my hand like a lifeline, my heart hammering a frantic, erratic rhythm against my ribs. I hadn't called 911. Not exactly. Sarah Jenkins was smart. She was ruthless. She was a lawyer who knew how to manipulate the system because she helped build it. If she was watching me, if she had a sniper or a hired goon in the bushes, calling the police in a panic might be the trigger that ended my life. I had to be smarter. I had to be the forensic accountant who found the hidden pattern in the chaos. I had to be the girl who survived the shelter. I reached the terrace. It was eerily empty, the stone angels staring down with blind, indifferent eyes, the fountain silent in the autumn chill, leaves skittered across the pavement like dry bones. I stood near the edge of the arcade, waiting. "Hello, Elena," a voice echoed from the shadows of the stone arches. Sarah stepped out. She hadn't changed much in 16 years, yet she had changed entirely. Her hair was grayer, her suit was Italian silk, and she wore diamonds that likely cost more than my parents' original house. But she still had that same look of calm, predatory competence that had fooled a 16-year-old runaway so long ago. She held a gun, a small, sleek black pistol that looked absurdly out of place in her manicured hand, but she held it steady. "I should have known you'd figure it out," she said, walking slowly toward me, her heels clicking on the stone. "You always did have a head for details. That's why I liked you. You were the only one in that family with a brain." "You used me," I said, my voice steady despite the fear freezing my blood. "You took the information I gave you in confidence, the vase, the car, my parents' paranoia, and you used it to bleed my family dry for 16 years. "Your family deserved it," Sarah scoffed, stopping 10 feet away. "They threw you away like garbage. They left a child on a porch with a suitcase. I just redistributed their wealth. Think of it as a belated inheritance tax. I did you a favor, really. I punished them for you." "You killed Julian," I said, stepping closer, needing her to say it. "He got greedy," she shrugged, as if discussing a bad investment. "He figured out I was the one squeezing your parents. He wanted a cut. He threatened to go to the police about the boy in Seattle if I didn't pay him. Can you imagine? A thief threatening a blackmailer. It was poetic, really. So I poisoned him. Arsenic is surprisingly easy to acquire if you have the right connections. And Isabella, well, she was the perfect scapegoat. The flighty, embezzling wife. Who would doubt it? The police certainly didn't. And the boy? I asked, my voice trembling with the weight of the question. The neighbor in Seattle? The one Isabella supposedly crippled? Did he die? Sarah laughed. It was a cold, dry sound that seemed to suck the warmth out of the air. That's the best part, Elena. That is my masterpiece. There was no boy. I stared at her, my breath catching in my throat. What? Isabella didn't push anyone. She didn't hurt anyone. I made it up. But she told me, my mother told me. She believes she did, Sarah smiled, a cruel twist of her lips. I planted that memory, or rather, I planted the suggestion. I knew your parents were paranoid about her reputation. When you told me about the vase and the car, I realized how easy they were to manipulate. I hired a private investigator to dig into their past. I found out they had a dispute with a neighbor over a property line years ago. I contacted your parents anonymously, pretending to be a witness to an accident involving Isabella and the neighbor's non-existent son. I sent them fake medical reports. I terrified them. They were so ready to believe their precious daughter was flawed, so desperate to cover it up, they packed up and ran without even verifying if the kid existed. They left you behind because I told them to. I told them the witness would only keep quiet if they cut ties with anyone who might ask questions, meaning you. I isolated them so I could feed on them. My knees almost gave out. The world tilted on its axis. There was no crime. There was no murder. Just a lie. A lie so big, so encompassing, it had swallowed 16 years of my life. It had cost me my childhood. It had cost my parents their fortune. It had cost Julian his life. You monster, I whispered. You destroyed my family for nothing. For money, she corrected. Millions of dollars. And now, you're going to help me finish it. You're going to write a confession note. You're going to say you killed Julian because you were jealous of Isabella. You're going to say you found out about the money and snapped. You're going to jump off this terrace, and the case will be closed. She raised the gun, aiming it at my chest. Right, or I'll shoot you and write it myself. I looked at the gun. I looked at her, standing there in her arrogance, believing she was untouchable. And then I looked past her, to the deep shadows of the arcade. Did you get that? I asked loudly, my voice echoing off the stone. Sarah frowned, her confidence faltering for a fraction of a second. Who are you talking to? The police, I said, pointing to my coat pocket. I didn't call 911. I called the detective on the case before I left the apartment. I've been on an open line for the last 20 minutes. He's been listening to everything. The arsenic, the fake boy, the blackmail. Sarah's eyes went wide. The color drained from her face. She spun around just as floodlights blinded us from the tree line. Drop the weapon! NYPD! Hands in the air! Red laser dots danced on Sarah's chest. Cops swarmed from the bushes, from the tunnel, from the stairs, their weapons drawn. It was over. Sarah hesitated for a split second, looking for an escape, looking for a loophole, but there was none. She dropped the gun. It clattered on the stone with a metallic ring. As they tackled her, cuffing her hands behind her back, she looked back at me, her face twisted in pure, unadulterated hate. You think you won? She screamed as they dragged her away. You're still the throwaway daughter. They never loved you. You saved them and they still won't want you. I know, I said quietly, watching her disappear into the back of a squad car. But I love me, and that's enough. The fallout was massive. Sarah's arrest exposed the entire web, the fake blackmail, the Ponzi scheme she was running on the side, the framing of Isabella. The district attorney dropped the murder charges against Isabella the next morning. My parents were waiting for her at the prison gates, a swarm of paparazzi and news vans surrounding them. I watched from a distance, standing by a parked car across the street, unseen. I saw the heavy metal gates open. I saw Isabella walk out, looking frail and broken, blinking in the sunlight. I saw my mother run to her, sobbing, hugging her as if she were a porcelain doll that had been glued back together. I saw my father wrap his expensive coat around her shoulders, shielding her from the cameras. They looked like a family again, broken, battered, stripped of their dignity, but together. I waited. I waited for them to look around. I waited for them to ask where I was. I waited for them to acknowledge the daughter who had flown across the country, hacked into a dead man's emails, and stared down a murderer to save them. But they didn't. They didn't look for me. They focused entirely on the golden child. They ushered Isabella into a waiting limousine, ignoring the reporters shouting questions. My mother wiped Isabella's tears. My father held Isabella's hand. And then, the car drove away. I stood alone on the sidewalk, the exhaust fumes washing over me. Sarah was right. They didn't want me. But as I watched the taillights fade into the New York traffic, I realized something. It didn't hurt. Not the way it used to. The wound had cauterized. The shadow was gone. Not because they had moved, but because I had finally stopped standing in it. I had saved them not for their approval, but to prove to myself that I was strong enough to do it. I went back to Chicago the next day. I didn't ask for a reward. I didn't ask for an apology. I changed my number. I blocked their emails. I went back to my office, to my ledgers, to the quiet safety of my numbers. 6 months later, I received a package. It had no return address, but the postmark was from Vermont. Inside was a check for $2 million and a note written on simple stationery. They didn't want to send this. They said you caused too much trouble. They said you humiliated the family by involving the police. But I know. I know what you did. I know about the lie. I know I didn't hurt that boy. Thank you for giving me my life back. Please, live yours. Bella. I looked at the check. It was guilt money, blood money. It was a payoff to stay away. I could have torn it up. I could have burned it. I could have sent it back. But I didn't. I deposited it. I used it to start my own firm, a firm dedicated to helping victims of financial abuse, to helping people who had been trapped and exploited by their own families. I hired the best lawyers, the best investigators. I became the person I had needed when I was 16. I never saw my parents again. I heard through the grapevine that they moved to Europe, hiding from the scandal, living out their days in a smaller, bitter world. Isabella quit the violin. She opened a bakery in a small town in Vermont, far away from the stage, far away from the pressure of being perfect. She sends me a tin of cookies every Christmas. I don't eat them, but I keep the tins on a shelf in my kitchen. A reminder that even the golden child breaks eventually, and that sometimes breaking is the only way to become real. I sit in my office now, overlooking the Chicago skyline. The sun is setting, casting long, purple shadows across the city. The reflection in the glass shows a woman who is strong, successful, and whole. I am not the other daughter anymore. I am not the shadow. I am Elena Vance. I survived the abandonment. I survived the lies. I survived the truth. And as the city lights flicker on below me, one by one, I realize that I have built something that no one can take away. I have built a life that belongs only to me, and I am finally, truly free. He was in a wheelchair. She said he would never walk again. She said he was just a child. She said if we paid her, she would represent the family and keep it quiet. She said she could make the police report disappear. We just wanted to protect Bella. We couldn't let her life be ruined by one mistake. You didn't protect her, I said, grabbing my coat from the rack. You fed her to a wolf, and you sacrificed me to do it. I didn't tell her where I was going. I didn't tell her that I had already forwarded every document to a private server. I walked out of the penthouse and into the cold morning air. I had a meeting to prepare for, and I knew exactly how to trap a lawyer who thought she was smarter than everyone else. I wasn't going to Central Park for money. I was going there for blood.